So Praful Saklani, co-founder and CEO of Pramata. I am very, very excited to have you on the call today. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Same here, Joe. And thanks for inviting me on. And I'm glad to be able to share some of our fun ideas on legal tech and Gen AI and everything in between with your audience.
Absolutely. All
Yeah.
right. Well, there's a lot to unpack and
Mhm.
uncover here, and I think there's a few things that I want to sort of tee up before we sort of launch into it. I'd love to hear about your past and what led you to becoming the co-founder and moving in the direction of Pramata. But sort of setting expectations around where we sit today and what's happening. One quote from Goldman Sachs says that research is basically looking at 44% of legal work could be automated by AI in the not too distant future. If not, it's already sort of happening right now. This to me is amazing for access to justice, but conversely, for organizations, big law and corporate legal departments, this could be a bit of a change. Clearly, we're seeing this. People in the legal industry I've been a part of for the last 18 years, they're slow to change, slow to adapt and adopt, as I know that you know. But this new movement afoot that really sort of hit an inflection point over the course of the last, I'd say, 10 months is changing everything. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on that in just a second, but I would really love to hear about what led you down the path of co-founding Pramata.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, that's a juicy question. I look forward to our topic that I look forward to getting into. But yeah, just to share a little bit about my background. So I've been a technologist ever since the mid to late 90s when I founded my first startup. And I like to tell people I was doing AI before it had the cool name of AI, right? So well, it used to be called expert systems, smart systems, et cetera. And
That's right.
I was originally focused on the travel industry, where how do you understand all this streaming data that's coming in from all these transactions and help companies better negotiate with their travel suppliers, airlines and hotels. And that startup was successful and gave me the taste of, ooh, there are all of these cool business problems out there that haven't been impacted by technology, and I'd love to take on more of them in the future. And so fast forward a little bit to 2005, 2006, and I was looking at, what do I want my next startup to be? And I'd remembered when I sold my previous company that we had an army of lawyers come in. And at that time, remember, this is 2001, 2002, they were rifling through bankers' boxes and writing on yellow legal pads and charging me $600+ an hour.
It's
Okay.
wild.
And I remember
Yes.
thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I started asking around with my friends who were general counsels, and they were like, oh, not only is this not a solved problem, the bigger the company, the worse the problem, because we really don't have any easy way of understanding what's inside all of these documents other than manual review and brute force. And so I knew there was a business problem there, and that led to the creation of Pramata. Yeah.
So in a snapshot, and we'll probably get into more of the weeds, so to speak,
Mhm.
around Pramata and the different product or the primary product that you're involved with. What are you all trying to do? What are you solving for right now?
Yeah, so our focus is contract management. And in particular, if you think of contracts, they're the scaffolding of a company. Pretty much any relationship you have as a company that's of value, whether it's with a customer, whether it's with a vendor, whether it's with an employee, there's an underlying contract. And companies spend a lot of time and energy negotiating these complex commercial structures, whether they're selling something, buying something. And that information needs to be understood and available throughout the enterprise or throughout an organization, because it's not just needed for legal, right? It's needed for finance, it's needed for procurement, it's needed for sales, it's needed for product, et cetera, et cetera. And so our focus is radically simple contract management. How can you make it so that any company, anyone in that company who needs information from contracts can get access to it in 2 clicks? And how can you leverage that information to negotiate better contracts, improve your commercial strategy, and a whole bunch of downstream benefits. So radically simple contract management is the focus. Yeah.
So thank you for that overview. Now, when we start to think about the generative AI, which has now hit sort of a crazy point in time, what's the impact that you see on contract management?
Well, so generative AI is in my view, a big leap forward in the ability to both understand unstructured text, interact with unstructured text, and create new forms of unstructured text, okay? So if you think about it, until now, the state of the art in contract management, at least in terms of creation, et cetera, has been create as many templates as you can, try to standardize as much as you can. And there's only one problem, and that problem is called the counterparty. Like the fact that you have to negotiate with somebody else who, guess what? They have their own mandate to standardize all the text and move everything to templates. And you're working off different text and different templates. And so there's a little bit of an arm wrestling match. And that's never going away. And you want that. You want your organization to be responsive to, to opportunities to, find win-wins, so to speak, in negotiations. And so, what we see with generative AI is whether it's analyzing a family of existing contracts and understanding, hey, what really happened here across the master agreement, the order form, the amendment 2, amendment 3, understanding, hey, where are things I should be renegotiating based on my playbook? Can I get a new contract, a new draft of an amendment based on the last amendment I did? You see what I mean? You can actually improve the analysis, you can improve the compliance, you can improve the drafting process. It really opens up new avenues that, I frankly thought even a few months ago that we might be 5 years away from. It's a leapfrog. Yeah.
Well said, really well said. So when I start thinking about this stuff, it goes back in time when I used to meet with law firms of all sizes, and one of the biggest concerns that they had was that they wanted everything that they had behind their firewall. So of course their content, whatever sort of pseudo algorithms they had back then, all behind their firewall. Now you're talking about everything being SaaS-based, right? So
Yep.
software as a service, things in the cloud. These algorithms sitting in the cloud, and then the data collection and the processing therein, all that information can potentially create a confidentiality issue. How in the world do we balance that now that a lot of these models are sort of out there in the ether?
Yeah, so there's a few very practical steps that we recommend to everybody. Okay, so our company, we work with some of the largest companies in the world. We have 3 customers in the Fortune 10, and we also work with a whole slew of mid-sized companies, smaller companies, et cetera. And what we tell everybody is that everybody needs that enterprise class security and confidentiality on their information, right? And so I think there are ways with cloud to obviously make sure that you isolate databases and you follow all the best practices. And, we've had all the data security reviews, et cetera, by third parties. And there are straightforward ways to do that. The question gets, okay, as you get to these LLMs, these large language models, the biggest of which is GPT-4, and the next biggest one is one that we're using now called Claude 2, which is from Anthropic. The question is, how do I get that same enterprise level security with these new technologies? So, first of all, we tell everyone, if you're going to use ChatGPT, which is the online tool, just, there are settings that you can look up. If you say how to make sure GPT doesn't train off whatever you're sending it, there are settings that you can do to shut it off, et cetera. But we will not send any of our customer data to ChatGPT because we don't believe that at this time is enterprise level security. Okay, so Microsoft Azure in our case actually has an OpenAI service, which they've specifically designed because Microsoft knows about enterprise level cloud security. They've designed so you can isolate each customer's data and make sure none of it persists in the service. So none of it is used for training, none of it is used for these algorithms in the cloud, et cetera. And so anything that we're doing with Gen AI, we're working with that service. We're sharing all the details with our customers that are using Gen AI to make sure that they're comfortable with all the security guidelines around that. But for the average person out there trying to use ChatGPT, all we say is, if you're going to use it, stay away from putting confidential information in it. And also make sure you shut off or you turn on all those features that make sure they can't train off of anything that you're sharing with it. Yeah.
So are you essentially able to opt out of that completely, or is it just you're hoping that that's the case?
Yeah, so OpenAI on ChatGPT, they have some pretty big claims about data confidentiality and security that if you actually disable, like you can literally go, there's a feature that where you can say that none of my information will be stored, and none of my any of my chat information will be deleted as soon as the session is over, and because the session is in memory, it's not on any disk, and none of my information can be used to be trained. And there's teeth behind those claims. So if they were to violate those claims, I think, especially if they were to violate those claims with legal professionals, I think they would have a big problem on their hands. But that being said, we would still, and this concept of a sandbox is very popular in the legal operations community. Yeah, we would suggest that you make sure that the people who are allowed to use Gen AI are trained on how to shut all this stuff off, if they're using ChatGPT, I should say. And you make sure that they know that wherever possible, blind names, don't send any PII, all these things that, because it is a public platform. And even though they have those considerations in there, a little bit of caution is still good, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so transitioning a little bit over to this concept of the legal platform. I don't know, probably 5, 6 years ago, I would go around talking about this eventual idea of a legal platform, which is basically an application, usually a SaaS application that has all the different components that a law firm or a corporation would need, corporate counsel, to integrate all sorts of things, conflicts, to of course contract systems, all of those in one location. Um, do you see that as something that would fit into the Pramata example of the ecosystem, an open ecosystem that would connect various apps and APIs and all these things into one place?
Yeah, so I think that what you're talking about is the way the most sophisticated companies are looking at data from any of their legal tech systems, right? And I think it's very important, if you really want that broad of a system, to look at it, the needs of legal operations, but also to look at, how do you empower the whole business, right? And that's actually one of the pillars of our product strategy, which is, if you have a system in which the data is designed by legal, for legal, exclusively for that use, it has some value. But on the other hand, especially when it comes to contracts and commercial relationships, finance is a major consumer of this information, right? Sales is a major consumer of this information, et cetera. And so, so for example, you're already seeing that, in our case, contract management has to be, if you're dealing with sales, has to be integrated into the CRM. It has to be integrated into either Salesforce or into Microsoft Dynamics, because getting your sales reps to log into yet another system to try and understand what's in the contract isn't going to work, right?
No, right.
You're already seeing with a lot of finance people, we're seeing a lot of the data. Companies like to port it into things like Snowflake or an enterprise data warehouse, so they can mash it up perhaps with contract data versus billing data and understand where there might be discrepancies. And so, any cloud-based application, if you're buying one, you absolutely should be asking, how open is this? How can it all tie together with the other stuff that I'm doing? Because, that's where the whole industry is going, which is you need your legal stack, but your legal stack does not exist in isolation from the other stacks, right?
No, amazing. No, thank you for that. Do you know of any new or powerful use cases in this space for this?
For Gen AI, you're talking about
Exactly.
in general? Oh, absolutely. So, I think that the biggest single thing that we see with Gen AI is the ability to do very sophisticated analysis of not just individual documents, but families of documents. Because remember, your most complex commercial relationships invariably didn't hatch out of an egg. There's invariably a master agreement, a bunch of amendments, et cetera. And to be able to do analysis on, hey, this thing is a monster thing with 11 documents and, 385 pages of stuff. Like, what is the stuff I really should be paying attention to that is outside of my norms from a playbook perspective or compliance perspective? And so before, if you wanted to build a system that could do that comparison, you needed a lot of IT people to build a whole bunch of rules, and you needed people to, keep up with those rules. And it was, took years to figure all that out. You can now write a playbook that is in, common sense English, okay? You can write it out in English. You can then compare that playbook against a set of contracts that are also in common sense English, and it will actually give you very good observations. Now, there are certain rules you have to work around, but I'm saying it doesn't require IT people anymore. It just requires logic, which frankly, if you were building a legal playbook before and it wasn't logical, then it probably wasn't a very good playbook. So if you can just write out something logically in a paragraph, like, oh, if it's net 30, that's considered low risk for us from a sales contract for a payment term. If it's net 60, that's medium risk. Net 90 is high risk. You can write something that simple out. You can compare it using Gen AI against a contract, and it'll say, yeah, the payment term in this is actually high risk based on what you told me. It's that easy. Yeah.
Amazing. No, I mean, that's
Yeah.
leaps and bounds ahead of where it used to be even whatever, several years ago.
Yeah.
So I like to go down a path more philosophical observations on what we're seeing over the course of the last 8 months. And though there's been a lot happening way before that with AI, I don't think people really took notice of it, especially within the legal industry. You go to a major conference like ILTACON, and people
Mhm.
have been talking about certain things, but it really hasn't crept into the mainstream per se. Maybe some of the largest organizations are working on it. They'll have coders, whatever the case,
Yes.
working on concepts or ideas and try to build those things out. But ultimately, clients weren't necessarily asking for them explicitly. They were looking for efficiencies and all sorts of things. But now we're at a point where everyone's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? How are you doing new things in this space?" So one thing that I'm kind of curious about, and you can talk about this on behalf of the company or just as an individual, and either one
Mhm.
is totally fine by me. But I'd like to try to understand why so many organizations, especially within the legal industry, of course, were sort of taken aback at what came out with OpenAI and ChatGPT because they've been around for a long time. I mean, I've been talking about them for a long time, and all of a sudden it was November, and people like, wait, what is this? How does this work?
Yeah.
Why do you think people really kind of missed this?
Yeah. So I think that a genuine leap occurred between GPT-3 and GPT-4. Okay. So I think that
Yeah.
was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was where GPT-4, what we're seeing in all the legal use cases that we tested against is it's a leap ahead of GPT-3. Okay. It's not close, right? And I think you saw a benchmark somebody did where GPT-3 got something like 25% on a bar exam, but GPT-4 just out of the box got something like 90+% on one of the bar exams. So that's the kind of leap that we're seeing too in our own tests, right? So the second thing is ChatGPT. So, before, if you wanted to use GPT-3, great, okay, go on to OpenAI's weird or wonky site and then, get your API key and then, fire up your Python, code
Yes.
environment and
Yeah.
start going against it. And, that's available to like 0.1% of the population. But now ChatGPT, like people's kids are using it. So I was at a conference in LA about a month ago, and I met with 14 general counsels at this conference. I had one-on-one meetings, and I asked everybody as a survey, "Hey, have you personally played around with GPT?" And 11 of the 14 said yes. And of the 11 who said yes, about 5 or 6 of them said their kids were already, using it. Hey, mom, hey, dad, you should check this out. And people were already using it to test it for legal use cases informally, right? And when I asked all of them the question of, well, why this is a really high adoption rate for something that didn't exist, 120 days ago in terms of GPT-4, all of them pretty much said a variation of, well, I don't want to be left behind because I know this is going to be a major part of the industry moving forward. So I think there were genuine breakthroughs with ChatGPT and GPT-4 that led to an awareness. It broke through the static. Yeah.
No, all right, really well said. And it makes a lot of sense to me. And I mean, that jump from 3 to 3.5 to 4 was huge. And then
Yeah.
seeing people actually tangibly use something that they could just sign on to the website, create a quick account, and then start
Yep.
firing off questions. And all of a sudden, it's feeding back information that they never thought they could to get that quickly. It could be anything. I mean, literally anything, as we all know at this stage. But that was wild. I think my first real quick tangent experience with this was with Dolly. So Dolly 2,
Yeah.
I guess it is that now. So whatever, maybe 8 months, 10 months before, when I was able to craft simple sentences or whatever the case is into a search box, and then it's creating art from that. I was stunned, and I was like, well, if it can do this with art, then how far are we away from being able to use the same sort of concepts and ideas with language in such
I
a
mean, Joe,
fashion?
that I had the same. That was the same epiphany for me before GPT-4. This was in the GPT-3. Between 3 and 3.5, when Dolly was really the eye opener for me because I love art. I studied art history when I was younger as a hobby, but my personal ability to actually create art is in stick figure land.
Right there with you.
and what and what I felt was like this suddenly created like a new limb in my brain. It
Yeah.
created like a whole new ability to do something that I'd always wanted to do, but was just not capable of doing without it. And so you're absolutely right. I started creating great, fun artwork.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, okay, this is going to change a lot. Yeah.
No, it
Mhm.
definitely. And then I'll go one quick step in the same direction, but out further. And that is when I started seeing generative art in the sort of NFT space, not the ridiculous, monkey pictures, whatever the case is, but actual art that people
Yeah.
are creating from this. I was just blown away, and it made a lot of sense to me. And then okay, all right, this is something that's of value, or we'll see if it has
Yeah.
value long term. But that's yet another area to go in.
I do want to get to your 44% Goldman quote.
Sure,
I mean,
please.
can we kind of loop back to that? Because to me,
Absolutely.
it goes to the whole, like, how has this surprised everybody? So, did you ever see the movie Hidden Figures, about the NASA,
Yes.
astronauts? And
Of course. Yeah.
so if you were to teleport back to, 1962, about 85% of an engineer's job was computation. Okay. And long form math. Okay. Seriously, like it was a lot
Yeah.
of like figuring out how
The
all this
scary
stuff ended
stuff.
up, and there were armies of these people called computers, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying this because people might not have seen the movie. If you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. But when calculators were created and computers were created, did that reduce the aggregate number of engineers that were required? Yes, it reduced the number of people that were required to do engineering as it existed in 1962. It probably reduced the number of engineers that were required in 1962 by like 75%. But I guarantee you there are like 50x the number of engineers today than there were in 1962. So what happened, right? Yeah.
So no, and it's exactly where I wanted to go. One of the last questions, and it's a hard question, but I think you're showing your cards a little bit. But I really want to
Yes.
dig into this a tad. Um, So for the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, a lot of organizations have been saying, oh, we're starting to use the AI term. Clearly, it's been there for the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
But it was the idea, and people were very nervous initially, like, oh, it's going to take away jobs. It's going to automate so many different things. And then they used the terminology, I think IBM actually originally coined it, augmented intelligence. So this AI is going to do this thing, and it's sort of up to you as a human, the best way, or maybe it's some decisions. You make a decision A, B, or C, and you as a human can make that decision. So ultimately, what we're starting to see is that um, this has progressed extraordinarily quickly, and so much to the extent that people are more than that blown away by this. So as things have become more sophisticated, um, I am still of this mindset. I don't want to be a doomsayer, but one
Mm-hmm.
of those things is that it is potentially taking away jobs. Are we really kind of just saying that's not taking away jobs just to try to make people feel better about this? Or is it concretely we're going to start losing jobs, and we're going to have money given to people across the board, common interest of money giving out to people
Yeah.
so that they can actually survive, so to speak. Do you think we'll ever get to that point?
Yeah, I think we may be on slightly different sides of this issue, philosophically, and so I think whenever any wave of technology has hit, there's always been a prophecy that it's going to kill a whole bunch of jobs, right? And take e-commerce, right? So people said, oh, everything will go online, retail, like all the jobs will essentially go away, when the reality is that online e-commerce actually has created a lot of jobs. They're just different jobs, right? And so, when I map these thoughts or these ideas to legal, yeah, I think a lot of the legal jobs of today are threatened. I think if you look at what a first or second year associate does, or a junior or mid-level paralegal does right now, I think that 70 to 80% of those tasks are on the verge of automation and elimination, right? That being said, I think the need for people to be able to leverage these tools to craft better strategy, to negotiate more effectively, to help companies align their legal strategy with their largest business strategy, et cetera. I think all of that. I'm not even talking about the litigation side of things. I think all of that is going to create a bunch of new jobs, right? And so I think that the face of the industry will change. But in most cases, I've seen when the pie shrinks in one area, the pie grows in another area, right? And so I think it's going to change. And I think a lot of the jobs that we currently have, and I'm just now talking specifically of legal, will shrink, or will maybe eliminated. But I think it will also create a whole host of new jobs and approaches to using this information that were impossible 6 months ago. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm on the Council of Innovation for the ABA, and they're really focus in on this in terms of future jobs for those that are graduating or in law school right now,
Yeah.
because there's so many jobs that they're not really able to find in the traditional track of going to a law firm or whatever, going to government agencies. So they're coming up with all these different branded concepts around, okay, I'm an attorney or I went to law school. What do I do next? Um, you think about any kids that are graduating from college or from grad school.
Yeah.
What's in their next part of life in terms of any sort of job? Because it's now for me even more difficult than it ever has been to help craft and come up with new ideas in that direction for them. But yeah, it's wild.
It's
So
definitely a frontier that we're on the edge of, and you're right. With any frontier, there's uncertainty and risk associated with it. Yeah, to be sure.
yeah, no
Yeah.
question. All right. So last thought or question. Anything else that you'd like to touch on or go over?
Yeah. So to me, I think the big the big opportunity with Gen AI is that it takes a lot of these tasks of, understanding what's in written information, curating that information, using that information in different ways. It will create a much simpler interface for doing things that before used to take hours. So creating a first draft of something, you should be able to do it in 30 seconds. That doesn't mean the draft doesn't need to be edited. It doesn't need to be infused with strategy, right? So CAD/CAM could take an architectural design and allow you to, instead of drawing it out over many hours, you could probably do it in, an hour. But you still need to think through the design and the principles of the design and why should this be here versus there. And that doesn't change, right? So I would encourage everybody looking at this is that how can I use this as a way to make myself 5x or 10x more valuable and more productive in what I'm doing, rather than fearing what it's taking away? Think about what it can add, right? And I think that is the mindset to everybody who's a little afraid of where this is going. If a lot of your time is spent doing the stuff that you think Gen AI is going to do in the future, it should allow you to do 5 times more, in a much easier way. So there is a ninja move there. To me, that's to me what that compression of time and complexity is the real opportunity here. Yeah.
Praful, thank you so much. That was amazing to hear your concepts and ideas, especially around the ninja. So you're right. You're absolutely right. People have to be able to adapt and think about these things. So
Yeah.
really, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks a lot, Joe, for having me, and thanks to your audience. Hope this was helpful. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.